Mac, we got BLG in the green room. Let's get him up right now. Brandon Lee Gowton joining us here on Birds 365. You can read all his work at bleedinggreennation.com. Follow him on X at Brandon Gowton. BLG, welcome to the show, my friend. How you doing on this Wednesday morning, the first Wednesday together of the Sean Mannion era, my friend?
Yeah, it's an exciting time.
Yeah, what I mean, we haven't talked to you. It happened on Thursday, so we talked to you on Wednesday. So I don't want to muddy it up for you. What are your thoughts on the Sean Mannion hire? Interesting, to say the least.
It is interesting because we when we're talking about analyzing it, like what are we really going on here? there isn't much
Yeah, I
from a
know.
standpoint. It's 2 years of coaching. Period. Like that's crazy. The fact that he was an assistant in 2024, which is a pretty like nebulous title as well, and then he's a quarterbacks coach in 2025, and that's it. Like that's pretty crazy. I know he played in the league, and he's been around a lot of the NFL's what's regarded to be their top offensive minds at various points in his career, and with them being in different positions. So I think that's nice to be exposed to all of that. But I mean, the reality is it's just such a big unknown that we're not really going off a lot here.
The,
BLG, go ahead, John. Good.
sorry, Zen. It struck me, and I don't know if it struck you. The Eagles were really branding this as a Nick Sirianni hire. I mean, from start to finish. Did you get that? Because that's, and whether it was or whether it wasn't, from a negative standpoint, if you want to go negative, um, that to me means they're saying, hey, if things go wrong, blame this guy. Or am I being too harsh with that?
No, I think that's fair. Part of what I mean, it's just hard to believe from a standpoint. It's hard to believe that Howie and Jeffrey Lurie are not involved at all, or like
Well, yeah, they have
maybe
to sign off. I mean, at the bare minimum, right?
well, and also making the connection, or kind of like being like, "Hey, Nick, talk to this guy." Not necessarily, "Hey, you have to hire this guy," but like, "Hey, have this guy on your radar." And it's worth noting that Sean Mannion, one of the coaches he did overlap with at one point, is Jed Fish, who obviously was Howie Roseman's former college roommate. So I'm
Yeah.
sure that connection, could have been relevant to this whole thing at some level. So yeah, I think ultimately, like it's hard it's hard when you look at the other coaches they've had on their staff in the past and who very much have not been Nick Sirianni hires, and to say like, oh yeah, he did all of the legwork on this one without the organization being involved at all.
But that to me, the troubling part of that, and I agree from that standpoint, is that to me they're highlighting that this is, in other words, they're setting him up to blame,
Yep.
and which I get kind of a 2013 Chip Kelly feel, not 2013, 2016, his last season, 2015.
15.
Yeah, 2015, where you remember that convoluted Jeffrey Lurie explanation when he moved Howie off of personnel. And it was basically, and I'm paraphrasing, it was basically, well, I had to see what I have in Chip Kelly, and which I always thought was probably his worst decision as an owner, results wise, probably borne out. But
Hmm.
I get that same feeling here. It's like, are they saying we got to let Nick, we got to give Nick this power to see what we have? I fear there might be a little of that in this. Is that too conspiratorial?
I don't think it's like insanely off base. I think it's kind of like splitting the difference a bit because if they really wanted to go all in on that concept, and there was some talk of this last week before they ultimately hired Sean Mannion, is it's like, hey, let's let Nick Sirianni call the plays. He can do that too.
Yeah.
And I feel like if you're trying to see like, and I actually don't dislike that approach from a standpoint of like, okay, Nick, like let's see the answers that you have. Like you kind of put the Eagles in this mess a little bit in terms of like you wanted Kevin Patullo, that was your guy. It didn't work out. All right, now let's see you kind of get out of it. I think it's splitting the difference a bit because they could have brought in, well, they could have had Nick call plays, or they could have brought, Jim Bob Cooter in here, or someone with ties to Nick Sirianni, and they didn't do that with either Manion or Josh Grizzard. So I think that's notable. So I don't think they're fully doing that, but look, I mean, a lot of the onus should be on Nick still because in Grizzard you have a guy with 1 year of play calling experience, and Mannion very little experience at all. Like Nick still has to. He might not be dictating the offense, but ultimately as the head coach, like, he's responsible for what this offense looks like. And also, I just want to throw in here, a lot of the issues the Eagles had on offense last year weren't just the play calls themselves. Obviously it was the design as well, I would say, but even more than that, it was like the direction that Nick Sirianni was kind of taking the offense in terms of being too conservative in these games, in the approach that he's dictating, which he's still going to be dictating as the head coach, because that's what the head coach does. He's not necessarily saying run this play call here, but he's saying, hey, like, we want to play it safe here, or hey, we're going to be more aggressive here. So that's still a big part of the equation here.
How hot do you think Nick Sirianni's seat is coming into this year with what happened last year and then these hires and the way it's been framed up? How hot is the seat, BLG?
It's a very funny question. It's a very fair question, but it's very funny just from the standpoint of they're still technically the reigning Super Bowl champions for a couple more days. But it's valid because, I don't think this season, as I've talked about before, with how bad they were in offense last year, there was a precedent for Nick Sirianni to be fired after this past season. Now, obviously, he wasn't. They gave him the grace, and I think that's reasonable. But just from a standpoint of, like, that's one of their worst offensive seasons since 2000. And the other two ahead of them, the coaches got fired. So I don't think if they're coming in with another season here and the offense is similarly dysfunctional and bad again, that you give him a third year of that. Like, I think the precedent is that there's going to be heads will roll at that point.
Is it, and Nick will always say, BLG, and I'm sure you've heard him say it a million times, it's never one thing. Everybody's got their fingerprints on them. I'm starting to think it is one thing on offense, and that thing is, you mentioned it, the conservatism, whether they call it risk averse. If they just get off that a little bit, I think this whole thing might be fixed. Now, the players have to play better. They have to execute. Landon's got to be healthy. Lane's got to be back. All this stuff. You have to have the same players. Are they just better if they're less conservative?
I think it helps. Yeah, I think you're pointing and you're getting better. But, like, part of that, the problem with that too, is I think part of my frustration with that is it kind of goes against what we all talk about in terms of just the talent on this roster. And it's like you're playing so conservative when you have all these guys where you should feel confident in them, or at least if you're gonna fail, go fail knowing that you tried to, like, be more aggressive and you believed in these players that you have, as opposed to being just so scared,
Right.
something's gonna go wrong. Like, trust them. Like, do they have that same kind of ability moving forward with the offense taking a step back? I think talent wise, which it might. I don't know to the same degree, but ultimately, yeah. I think they could improve still. It's just because it's like simple stuff. It's like the end of these end of half scenarios where it's just like all Nick's thinking about is what could go wrong, instead of what could go right. And
Yeah.
I think that does cost them. That does burn them in some of these games, and it ends up being the difference. And when you're having the head coach be like the CEO head coach and he's not in charge of the offense, like, I don't want just like solid game management. I want him to ace. He has to ace that. If that's one of the things he's doing, bringing to the table, he has to be really good at that. And I don't think he was good at that last year.
BLG, what do you think the hire of Sean Mannion means for Jalen Hurts?
Yeah, it's a big year for Jalen too, in terms of, like, I don't think Jeffrey Lurie is giving him, like, an unlimited runway here. Obviously he's the Super Bowl MVP, and I think Jeffrey Lurie likes Jalen Hurts a lot, but he has to produce. He has to be better than he was last year. And I'm interested to see if Sean Mannion can maybe push Jalen Hurts a little bit more out of his comfort zone. I kind of have to see that to believe that. And I think that's another thing that I question with the Sean Mannion hire. While I like the swing of the upside, I think it's a little, like, much for me to expect this first-time play caller who has barely any coaching experience to kind of be like telling Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni what's up, and then them, like, being like, oh yeah, deferring to him. So that's a dynamic I'm interested to see.
Yeah, I to further that, it's so difficult as you point out, Sean's history, and everybody's spoken glowingly about him. from Sean McVay to Kevin O'Connell to all these names, to Kubiak. I get the Kubiaks mixed up all the time. But I think it's Clint who he worked with. Everybody taught Matt LaFleur, obviously. Tom Clements, who was a legendary quarterbacks coach and was the quarterbacks coach there before, speaks very highly of him. Everybody speaks highly of him. But just to that nature of, like, think about it if you're Jeff Stoutland, and we all presume that Jeff Stoutland is coming back now. Maybe he's going to be the run game coordinator. Maybe he isn't. But he should be the offensive line coach. Jeff is 63 years old. He might be a Hall of Famer now that, he's already gotten the assistant coach legacy award if they start letting them into the Hall of Fame. And even the Jason Michaels of the world and the Jamal Singletons of the world, how does that dynamic work when you're like, boy, if there's, how you think about it, BLG, you've been doing this for so long and you're like, if things start to go wrong and they're like, what, and you is that a bad dynamic? I guess is what I'm asking.
Well, yeah, I'm interested to see what this offensive staff looks like, because another thing that goes with this inexperience, it's not that inexperience itself is bad. It doesn't mean he can't succeed, but there's just a lot of question marks. And one of them is just, what the assistant coaching staff looks like, because you figure the Eagles, the way they typically do it, they want to keep certain guys. And that's like their picks. Obviously, Sean Mannion isn't like coming in here and getting to decide all of that. But apparently, as Mike Garafolo noted, that like Sean Mannion is talking to Nick Sirianni, and they want to bring in some guys, some of like Sean Mannion's guys, just like when they hired Kellen Moore. They brought on Nussmeier and some lower level assistants as well, who had previously been with the Cowboys, because that's part of the equation, is having like those assistants to help kind of install and help this scheme move along. So I'm interested to see what that looks like, and does that create different factions? And then you have someone like Josh Grizzard, who gets brought in through all this, and he's not obviously like a Mannion guy necessarily, or a Nick guy necessarily, because he has no ties to either previously, which could be a good thing in terms of new ideas. But all this to say, like, I think it's easy to always assume that like everyone's pulling in the same direction. And obviously that's the goal, and that's part of the challenge for Nick and the organization. That's not always the case, in part because of where people are brought in and their personality types and the experience or lack thereof. So it's going to be interesting for me to see how this coaching staff, what it ultimately ends up looking like with who they hire.
The big name, it's already been brought up a lot this offseason, is A.J. Brown. You were talking about the two new offensive coaches. That's an important guy to get back if you're Sean Mannion and Josh Grizzard. I don't know if they will. What do you think the Eagles are thinking on A.J. Brown, and are you expecting him to be moved this offseason, BLJ?
Yeah, I think we talk about it every week, and we're going to keep talking about it every week until something happens, because it's the biggest, or one of the biggest questions hanging over this team. And I'm going to keep repeating what I've been saying. I just don't get the sense that AJ wants to be here. I think it's naive to think that like an offensive coordinator change is going to convince him. Like, I don't think that was the issue of his discontent last season. So until I see reason to believe otherwise, that he is coming back, like I just think he's gone. I think it's run its course. And I think both sides are going to end up feeling like it's just best to move on, and that benefits both sides at this point.
A little bit of breaking news. The New York Football Jets have hired Frank Reich to be their offensive coordinator. I bring up Frank to bring up this, and just to wrap up the coaching staff, because I do want to talk about Grizzard a little bit. I thought that was a smart move from the perspective of getting someone in who has some play calling experience, not a ton. And it didn't go great, but he had a lot of injuries. Mike Evans was gone for a long portion of the year. Bucky Irving was gone for a long portion of the year. So there were some excuses for Josh. But I think if you bring somebody in like Frank Reich to be like a senior offensive coach, and you have the Sean Desai, Matt Patricia effect, where it's like, oh, this guy's here if this guy falls on his face. And that's exactly what happened with Matt Patricia. I think that's what would have happened with Sean Mannion if you bring in somebody like Frank Reich. I think the Grizzard thing I really did like. It was more layered. It was like you have the insurance policy, but it's not so obvious to everybody that he's there as an insurance policy. Do you see it like that?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. And I also like buying low on him. Like you said, I think he kind of got a little bit of a raw deal there. First year on the job, they have a lot of injuries. You look at what that Bucks OC position was for his predecessors.
Yeah.
Dave Canales, Liam Cohen. It's really a springboard into some head coaching opportunities there. Also, an interesting background in terms of some of the coaches Grizzard has worked with as well, including, Mike McDaniel, who the Eagles seemingly probably wanted if they had their druthers when it comes to the offensive coordinator search. Has the Yale background, obviously. So just, seems like another smart mind to bring in here, the year of play calling experience. Good to have someone, I think, on staff with some extra, experience there. Yeah, I thought that was a good addition as well.
BLG, real quick on Mannion too. I was thinking about this earlier in the week. How good or bad is the setup for him? Like, first year play caller, first year coordinator, an owner that's proven he doesn't have patience, and if you don't, live up to it, you're gone. Head coach who nobody really knows, like, how much is he a part of it? How much say does he have? Are you running your own offense? Are you not? A quarterback that I can't tell if he's done running, if it was a Patullo Nick thing, or if he's going to keep running. Like, it feels like it's kind of a losing situation here for Sean Mannion if anything doesn't pan out to be perfect. How do you view the setup for him as a coach?
Yeah, it's a challenge. And I think, to me, the biggest question is, like, we're spending all this time, and understandably so, because there's not a lot going on at this time of year for the Philadelphia Eagles otherwise. 17 days or whatever it was, focused on this offensive coordinator search. They get the guy. That's great. That's well and good. Sean Mannion's going to be a factor in this team's success. But they have so many questions still that need answering, including the AJ thing, including Lane Johnson. Can Cam Jurgens and or Landon Dickerson get back to anything what they were? Or are they kind of just like done at this point? Or at least is one of them done? And if that's the case, what do you do about that? John Dotson, who obviously they're not going to miss, he's going to be a free agent. You're going to need to add a third receiver in here as well. Dallas Goedert's going to be a free agent. Like, there's so many moving pieces to me on offense that you need to figure out that, like, all of that has to be sorted through. And that's obviously not even going to be so much in Sean Mannion's purview as much as that's Howie Roseman and him having to, solve all that. And so therefore, like, my mind, like, Sean Mannion can do everything right potentially, and it might not matter if Howie doesn't get his part right. So I think it's a big offseason to be able to set this to set Sean Mannion up for success, and I think it's really like on Howie to do the heavy lifting in that regard to help him out.
I'm always, and I think rightfully so, anybody who has covered this team or been around this team, I'm always hyper-focused on the offensive line because that's what they believe in, first and foremost, BLG. And you mentioned two guys, injury concerns. Lane, we don't know if he's coming back. I think he'll come back. I don't know where you are with that, but I don't think he wants to end it not playing the last 8 games in this last season. So I think he'll be back. But one of the things I think everybody's excited about is that shift in philosophy. And I think mainly it's about the passing game and envisioning that. But if you think about what they were sniffing around and Mike McDaniel, as you mentioned, and Josh Grizzard, you go all the way back to the Shanahan scheme, the rushing scheme, and all the talk about Jeff Stoutland not being as involved as the run game coordinator. Boy, man, I'm looking at the talent they have, and if Landon Dickerson is going to be back and is going to play at a high level again and is capable physically, is he the type of guy you want to run a bunch of wide zone with? Is he the type of guy? He's like an ultimate power guy. Same thing. Now, Jordan Mailata is very athletic for his size. Same thing. Power guy. Pin and pull. Inside zone. Same thing with Lane. Very athletic, but still powerful strength. And that was the Eagles' running game. More so, I don't think Saquon Barkley is that kind of patient runner that's going to go horizontal and then cut it back vertically, which is what that wide. I think he's the get the double team, get the combo block to the second level, and bang, he hits a home run. Is the talent they have a fit for where everybody seems, including the Eagles, by the people they're interviewing? Yeah, they wanted to interview Mike McDaniel. They interviewed his offensive coordinator, Frank Smith. Josh Grizzard history, as you mentioned. It seems like they want to go that way. Does that make sense with the players they have?
And that's part of the challenge, right? Is making it work with what you have, and maybe needing to not just stick with what you've done, but also needing to adjust with what you have here. That's the balancing act. I feel like that goes into all of this. I feel like they should have the talent. Again, the Dickerson thing and the Juergens thing, those are so tough from a standpoint of, let's just say, like, when you had James Bradbury by the end of 2023, like, you knew he was not going to be the answer. Like, he was just done. Like,
Yeah.
but it's not ideal, but it's like, okay, this is not the solution, so now we need to look elsewhere. With those guys, it's like, it's not that clear cut. It's like, do we kind of just bank on them getting healthy? Because, we just gave Cam Jurgens a huge contract extension. It's not like, oh, we can just, you can cut him if you absolutely think he's just toast and literally can never play again, sure. But is it that simple? Probably not. And then what do you do if that is the case? So, I think that's the challenge. The biggest challenge, more than anything, like schematically, is just like, how do you even assess where those guys are physically and know whether you can count on them or not? Because you can't just invest in insurance policies everywhere on the roster. Like, you've limited resources to work with here, and that's going to be key to their success is figuring out where those guys are at and if they can get back.
Bill, I'm going to flip over to the defensive side with you and talk Jalen Phillips. You think a long-term deal is coming for Jalen Phillips? And if you do, where do you think that number falls?
Yeah, this is like a tough one. I feel like a lot of Eagles offseason moves, especially their free agents, like, you can kind of, in years past, it's been pretty like clear that, like, they're not going to keep that guy or they are going to keep that guy. Let's just say last year, for example, like, I think most people felt pretty sure they're going to re-sign Zach Bond, and also were pretty confident they weren't going to re-sign the likes of Milton Williams or Josh Sweat. With Jalen Phillips, that's kind of like a 50-50 to me. Like, I think that's really close. I really think it's going to depend on what the money looks like. If you don't keep him, which I would not hand Jalen Phillips a blank check for sure, but if you don't keep him, what do you really have at edge rusher here? Like, you have Jalen Hunt, great year, really encouraging. Nolan Smith, you're going to have the fifth-year option on him, but I don't think you're ready to sign him to a long-term deal now, and maybe if ever, depending on how this year goes. You just don't have a lot there. So you don't have to sign him because you could let him walk and sign someone else in free agency. But I really think that's one where, he's also, you look at all these lists, these free agent lists, Jalen Phillips, and this doesn't necessarily reflect how the NFL views him, but it could. He's one of the top free agents in the entire market, really, because it's not necessarily this robust
He's
class.
26. He's still 26, BLG, and
Yep.
That's the sweet spot of free agency. All the other edge rushers, people talk about Trey Hendrickson. He's 32.
Yeah.
Khalil Mack's 35. Joey Bosa's over 30.
Mm-hmm.
It's at a position. It's crazy to me. Spot Rack, and I don't want to pick on him, but they had his market value at 3 years and about $17 million. If I'm the Eagles, I jump at that.
Yeah. That's what Eagles signed Bryce Huff for, right?
Yeah. I'm like
no way.
And the cap's going from 279 to about 305 or somewhere in that range. Josh Sweat, we bring up a lot here because he got 18 million last year, but that was at 279, not at 305 with the cap. If I'm Jalen Phillips, I'm waiting and seeing somebody's giving me $20 million.
Mm-hmm.
So, do you go that, if that's the number, can you go that high for Jalen Phillips? I say yes. What say you?
I think that's like right on the cusp, probably, I'm guessing, of where they would want to be at. I think years matter in there. Yeah, I'm not sure. I haven't looked enough at the market, but I feel like, I think this is going to be one where I don't know.
Well,
that
let
they're
me
gonna
frame
do-
it that way. If you have
Okay.
to pay Trey Hendrickson at 32, 25 million, or
Yeah.
Jalen Phillips at 26, 20 million, which way are you going?
Yeah, I'm going. I'm going with the long-term deal there. Because again, you need answers there long-term too. But I'm not. It's just not. I'm not going into the Jalen Phillips negotiations with the mindset. I have to get this deal done. Like, it's. I know the Eagles spent a pick on him, but like that doesn't matter necessarily. Like the numbers have to be right. The deal has to be right. The conditions have to be right for that to happen. So I would like to get it done, but I'm not saying I have to get it done at all costs.
How do you think Vic's future, as we know, we now expect him to be back. But it's always been a short-term thing. And from the perspective of now it's really focused, this might be his last year. So with guys he does like he likes Jalen Phillips. He really likes Nakobe Dean.
Yeah.
Do you think that affects how he's thinking? Maybe the next guy, whoever that's going to be, maybe it's not going to be quite the fit. It's under Vic Fangio. Does that make things more difficult, or do you just got to say, we like this guy, we don't like this guy?
Yeah, I don't think you can make moves based on like, well, Vic really loves this guy, so we have to sign him to a multi-year deal, knowing that Vic might not even be here as early as next year. I think Vic has a voice, or at least how he probably consults him to some level, more than not at all, which I think should happen. But ultimately, I don't think anyone's telling Howie what to do, and he's going to ultimately do what he thinks is the best thing for the both short term and long term of the team. So yeah, I don't think that has a massive ramifications here.
You think Reed Blankenship gets signed?
Yeah, that's another one where I think that's like, I don't know about 50-50. I'd almost go 60-40, like in terms of the Eagles retaining him, because I just don't think his market's going to be out of this world to where the Eagles can't afford him, and he's a team captain here. And I think
Was it you, BLG, who floated out him to the Cowboys? Did I read that on Bleeding Green Nation this week? I think I did.
I mean, it's a logical connection.
Yeah, I agree with you,
Parker.
100%. Yeah.
So, and I think that would be a great addition for them in terms of like, they want to get a culture guy. They want to get a guy who can help, Christian Parker install whatever he wants to run down there. I definitely, he's, Reed's from the South, obviously, so that could be, more of a natural maybe fit for him if he wants to go back down there. I could see that absolutely making sense for them. So it's possible they outbid the Eagles.
All right, last one from me, BLG. Make sure you follow Brandon on the X platform at Brandon Gowton, bleedinggreennation.com. Your one-stop shop, I always say it, for your Eagles information. Go there every morning to get up to date. But, we talk about free agency. Most of it's about the defensive side of the ball because you have a significant player at all three levels, Jalen Phillips, Nakobe Dean, and Reed Blankenship. Offense, it's like, well, you mentioned before, Jahan Dotson's not going to be back. I think you'd like to have Dallas Goedert back, but he's 31. I mean, I don't think how, and you made him take a $4 million pay cut last year, BLG. How likely is that? I don't think it's likely. I think of all the offensive free agents, the one guy I want back and I'm targeting to get back is Brett Toth. I thought he'd get a good job as an interior backup offensive lineman, and that's valuable. I think all of us that have seen him over the years would be like, oh, this is going to be a disaster. Guy was good. Got to give credit where credit was due. He can play center. He proved it. He can play left guard. He can play right guard. I think it's important, and they don't have a lot of offensive free agents where it's realistic that they can be brought back in the case of Dallas Goedert. So it's a little off the wall, but I think he's the guy to target on offense.
Well, I know Jeff Stoughton feels the same way. Jeff Stoughton sure loves Brett Toth, and yeah,
it could be Grant Calcaterra because you have a tight end, but you need a tight end. But
please don't bring back Calcaterra.
Yeah.
Well, somebody's got to play tight end.
I know.
Colin Granson.
With
Not
Toth,
a lot of options.
no, I think that's fair. I mean, I think it'd be great to have him back in terms of, hey, they had their best running game of the season last year when Brett Toth was starting for them at center
Yeah.
instead of Cam Jurgens. Now, part of that's they played the New York Giants, but still, the way he was moving out there, he looked great. And I think I just talked about it with not being sure about Dickerson and or Cam Jurgens, and then you have some insurance there if you bring Toth back. I'm guessing his market's not going to be.
No, you're not going to have
crazy.
to pay him. It's going to be the veteran minimum, maybe a little bit more.
But maybe the Saints, they have Pagnetti, right, as the consistent
Yeah,
offensive line.
yeah.
Maybe there's a connection somewhere where he gets, if not guaranteed a starting job, more of a kind of open competition where he can get in the mix. Maybe that's.
But I guess the bigger point is that they don't have a lot of ability to move things on the offensive side of the football. They're still kind of blocked in by. Now, if you trade AJ, obviously you have to go draft a receiver at some point, most likely. If you lose Lane, you have to maybe you got to go up and get Caden Proctor or somebody like that. So there's potential wiggle room if you lose guys. But if everybody's coming back, there's not a lot of room to make decisions other than tight ends, really. Yeah. And wide receiver 3, which they don't use anyway. But maybe that changes.
Yeah, it's true.
With Sean Mannion, maybe that changes, but I'll believe it when I see it.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, BLG, real quick, last one. You're on the clock, 23 overall. What position is selected?
Yeah, I'm going to go offensive tackle. I mean, they've been wanting to do it for years now, and they need it. Because even if Lane is back, you don't know how many games you're getting from him next season. And Fred Johnson, I'm going to guess, is going to be gone. The way Fred was talking after the season, it sounds like he really wants to go, just kind of like he did last year, somewhere where he might be able to try to push for playing time more than he can here. Said he views himself as a starter. So at the very least, you're going to need a swing tackle. And I do think this is, I don't know if the guy falls. That's always been the problem, right? Is like the guy they want doesn't fall there. But I'm just going to guess here that he does and the Eagles go that direction. I think offense generally is just the safe bet in terms of like they're going to be spending a lot of money on defense. They have to reinvest in this offense with the young guys.
Keep an eye on that tight end. Everybody says they wouldn't draft a tight end, but Dallas Goedert goes here. Yeah. The Oregon kid.
They need one. They've, again, 0 tight ends on their roster. Other than Cam Latu. 0. That's crazy. 0. None.
They re-signed EJ Jenkins to a futures deal.
There we go, baby. EJ is there.
So,
EJ.
All right, BLG, thanks for joining in, brother. Make sure everybody goes and follows him at Brandon Gowton. Read all his work at bleedinggreennation.com. BLG, thank you, brother. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, bud.
Guys. Sounds good.
Who's going to win the Super Bowl? Did he leave?
Yeah, Damn, I can't believe we didn't ask him that.
Damn it. Yeah.
That's a miss. My bad, Joe.
Oh, well. No, I should have said it.
Too many Eagles things to get to BLG.
I know.
Appreciate him being here. John, good show today. We talked about some good stuff. As we're going to here he is. Wait. He joined us back. He's going to give us a full pick.
Did you hear me? Try to sneak it in? Yeah, who's going to win? Who's going to win, BLG?
You got me up?
Yeah. I got you.
Okay, yeah, I'm going to go with the Seahawks. Taking the Seahawks.
All right. Sam Darnold. The Sam Darnold revenge tour on everybody who hates Sam Darnold. I do think it's an interesting game, but I think clearly that the Seahawks have the better roster. I just think they're the better team. So I'm with you. I'm going Seahawks, but I'm glad he hopped back on.
Thanks for giving us the pick, brother.
All right, guys.
Thanks, bud.
Thanks. There's BLJ joining us right there on Birds 365. Appreciate him joining back in.